Imagine walking toward a river and realizing the shoreline is not land anymore. It is people. Not hundreds, not thousands, millions. No stadium gates, no ticket scans, no single loudspeaker telling a crowd where to go. Just a date that arrives like a verdict, because in Hindu tradition, the timing is chosen by the sky itself. And that is the first reason this gathering can exist. When a moment belongs to the cosmos, it feels bigger than argument. It feels unquestionable. But here's the twist. The question isn't why they came. The question is, how does this not collapse? Because Kumbh Mela is not one event. It's a moving architecture of faith built from rules you don't see, habits you don't hear, and care that rarely makes headlines. It happens in 4 sacred cities, on 4 riverfronts that become temporary worlds. Prayagraj, where rivers meet. Haridwar, where the Ganga slips out of the mountains. Ujjain, by the ship. And Nashik, along the Godavari. In a single season, these places transform. A city appears where yesterday there was sand. Corridors form where there were no streets. Families arrive with bundles, elders with patience, seekers with vows, and some with grief folded quietly behind their eyes. And yet somehow, movement becomes sequence. Sequence becomes order. Order becomes safety. Over the next minutes, we'll follow 3 threads that hold the impossible together. A myth that turned geography into a map, a sky that turns time into consensus, and a system part logistics, part moral discipline that teaches millions to move without breaking each other. Because when you strip away the spectacle, what remains is something more intimate. A human need to step into a boundary and come back out feeling lighter. And if that sounds like poetry, it is. But it's also engineering of meaning. So before we describe the river as a doorway, we have to understand the blueprint. Where did this map come from? Why these places? Why these days? And what invisible rules keep the shoreline from becoming a crush of bottom? The river is waiting. But first, we need the story that built the path to its edge. The myth of the nectar is cosmic, but its emotional logic is human. Everyone wants immortality in some form. Maybe not literal immortality, but the feeling that something in life is stable, that something precious will not be taken, that love, health, family, and meaning can be protected from the randomness of loss. The myth dramatizes that desire. Gods and demons both want the nectar because both fear disappearance. And then the myth adds another truth. Even if you obtain what you want, it will be contested. There is always a struggle over what is valuable. That struggle is not only external, it happens inside the human heart too. Competing desires, competing priorities, fear versus faith. When drops of nectar fall, the myth locates hope in specific places. It says, you do not need to chase immortality everywhere. You can go to a river, you can go to a threshold, you can align yourself with a story. This is what pilgrimage does. Psychologically, it takes a diffuse longing and gives it a destination. Instead of I want my life to be lighter, you can say, I will go to Instead of I want forgiveness, you can say, I will bathe on the auspicious day. Instead of I want to start over, you can say, I will enter the river. The destination becomes a handle you can hold. That is why Kumbh is not only about myth, it is about focus. It collects scattered hopes and gives them a single channel. And the 4 sites matter because they distribute the sacred across geography. Sacredness does not belong to one city only. It belongs to a network 4 thresholds that pull the country toward water again and again through time. This distribution makes the festival resilient. If one region is difficult one year, another becomes central in the next cycle. The sacred moves. The story travels. The rhythm continues. So myth, in the end, functions like architecture. It builds a shape people can inhabit. The origins of Kumbh Mela are wrapped in myth and cosmic legend stories that do more than explain the festival. They bind the human world to the divine. At the heart of it is the Samudra Manthan, the churning of the cosmic ocean into story gods and demons, devas and asuras labor side by side to churn a vast cosmic sea, seeking Amrita, the nectar of immortality. It is a paradox from the beginning. Enemies cooperating, not because they trust each other, but because they want the same thing. And that is the first lesson hiding inside the myth. Even rivals can synchronize when the desire is big enough. The churning is not gentle. It is struggle, it is exhaustion, it is ambition. The ocean yields wonders and terrors beauties, and poisons before it yields the thing everyone came for. And when the nectar appears, cooperation breaks, a fight erupts. The nectar must be protected, claimed, guarded. In the chaos, a vessel comes. A pitcher containing the nectar is carried through the sky. As forces battle for control, drops of Amrita fall to earth at 4 locations: Prayagraj, Haridwar, UG. Those places become more than points on a map. They become thresholds or riverbanks, seen as living passageways, where the ordinary world can briefly align with something eternal. In this story, water isn't just water. It is memory made physical. It is the idea that you can step into a river and step out. Ching, that belief turns a journey into a pilgrimage. And the myth does something brilliant. It anchors the sacred in geography. It says holiness is not floating in abstraction. It landed somewhere. It touched the ground. It marked water. So the rivers become a kind of spiritual infrastructure, places where the human life can return again and again to ask for renewal. But here's another twist. Even if you treat the myth as metaphor, the effect is real. Because myths are not only about whether they happened. Myths are about what they make people do. And this myth makes people walk, travel, gather, endure discomfort, and synchronize their private hopes into one public act. For centuries, devotees have come to these rivers, convinced that immersion on the right day, under the right sky, does more than cleanse the body. It cleanses the invisible weight people carry: regret, fear, grief, longing. In Hindu thought, purification is not only physical, it is moral and spiritual. It is connected to karma, to merit, to the idea that actions and intentions shape the inner life. If the universe runs on rhythm, then aligning yourself with that rhythm is not superstition. It is participation, and that's where the sky enters the story. The astrology and astronomy of Kumbh can be misunderstood by outsiders as superstition, but there is a practical effect, even if you ignore belief. Cosmic timing creates consensus. When millions must coordinate without modern registration systems, you need an authority that people accept without negotiation. The sky provides that authority. A date determined by celestial alignment feels less like an opinion and more like a fact. The moon will be full, whether you like it or not. Jupiter will be where it will be. The alignment does not care about personal preference. This creates a social miracle. Voluntary sync. People plan their travel around a window that is widely recognized. Communities talk about it for months. Families save money, request time off, prepare supplies. Sadhas and orders prepare processions. Governments prepare infrastructure. Vendors prepare food and shelter. Everything aligns around a cosmic schedule. And because the schedule is rare coming in long cycles, urgency becomes meaningful. Rare windows generate commitment. If you tell someone you can do this anytime, they may postpone forever. If you tell them this is the window, they will endure discomfort to reach it. That is why the crowd is so vast and so patient at the same time. They believe the window matters, so they accept delay as part of devotion. This timing also creates narrative tension for film. You can structure the story around the approach to the auspicious day, like the approach to an eclipse, anticipation building, crowds thickening, rituals intensifying, and then the peak moment when the river becomes a doorway. The sky, in other words, is not background. It is script. There is a moment that happens again and again along the banks, and it is always the same and always different. A person reaches the waterline. They have walked for hours or days. They have stood in a crowd long enough to forget what personal space feels like. Their feet hurt. Their throat is dry. The sun is already heavy, and still, when they finally arrive at the edge, they slow down. Because the edge is not just geography, it is permission. For some, the permission is joyous laughter, sudden smiles, the feeling of arriving after a long wait. For others, the permission is frightening. What if this doesn't help? What if nothing helps? What if the river cannot carry the weight I brought here? The body becomes the language of the soul. Hands tremble. Ellos, glos. A head bows. A person touches the water with fingertips first, testing it like a truth step. The first step into the river is where the festival becomes real. Up until 10, it could be described. Camps, crowds, myths, dates. But once you step into water, description becomes experience. The cold bites the ankles, the current pushes back. The river proves it is not an idea, it is a force. And that force matters, because purification is never only intellectual. People do not carry grief in their thoughts alone. They carry it in shoulders, in stomach, in breath. The river meets the body where the pain actually lives. That is why Kumbh does not ask only for belief. It asks for a physical act. A dip, a breath, a return to the surface, a moment where you can say, without needing words, I am still here. Kumbh Mela isn't whenever people feel like it. It isn't even once a year. Its timing is tied too long. Cycles especially. The movement of Jupiter in relation to the sun and moon, and two particular zodiacal associations linked to each site. To an outsider, this can sound like detail. To a believer, it is the entire point, because timing transforms an ordinary bath into the bath. The difference between a river on Tuesday and a river on the auspicious day is not water chemistry. It is meaning. It is the conviction that certain alignments open a window, in reality a narrow window, where cleansing becomes deeper, where vows become lighter, where the inner life can be reset. This cosmic timing does something powerful. It transforms belief into it creates a single day, sometimes a handful of days, when millions feel called to do the same act in the same place, for the same reason, not because they were invited by a human organizer, but because they believe the universe is calling them. And when a million people believe the universe is calling them, it changes how they move. They become patient. They become disciplined. They endure heat and crowding because they believe the window matters. In essence, Kumbh Mela is not only spiritual, it is astronomical crowd choreography. But here's the deeper insight. The sky doesn't just set the date. The sky gives the festival its authority. Because if the date came from a committee, people could argue. If the date came from a promoter, people could distrust. If the date comes from the cosmos, the date feels unquestionable. The sky becomes a neutral organizer, and that neutral authority allows millions to synchronize without a single central invitation. Still, even with myth and sky, a gathering of this scale should collapse, which means the third thread matters most. The system. A T-scale order is not just logistics, it is ethics. If people push, elders fall. If people panic, children get separated. If corridors clog, emergencies become disasters. So the festival teaches a moral discipline. Move with patience, make space, follow sequence, protect the vulnerable. This discipline is not enforced only by police lines. It is culturally reinforced. It is embedded in ritual. When a sadhu procession passes, people step aside. When announcements instruct a corridor, people comply because they understand compliance is part of devotion. This is a rare case where a crowd is not fueled by anger or consumption, but by aspiration. Aspiration changes behavior. People who might argue in daily life become gentle here because the environment invites gentleness. People who feel powerless in their ordinary lives feel part of something meaningful, and that meaning reduces the urge to fight for attention. This is why the Kumbh crowd can appear calmer than smaller crowds at other events. It is not because danger is absent. It is because culture and system cooperate, and you can see this cooperation in small scenes. Strangers forming chains to guide elders, volunteers handing out water, pilgrims sharing shade, people pointing directions to lost families. These are not headlines, but they are the quiet mechanics that keep the festival humane. In that sense, the festival does not only purify individuals, it trains a society in care. To understand Kumbh Mela without reducing it to a huge crowd, you have to follow sequence, because Kumbh is not random movement. It is layered ritual. First, arrival. Pilgrims come in waves, and each wave has its own mood. Some arrive with laughter families treating the journey like a reunion. Some arrive silent individuals who look like they have been carrying something heavy for a long time. The arrival itself is a threshold. Leaving home, leaving routine, leaving certainty. Second, orientation. People find camps, locate water points, identify routes to the ghats, the steppes, or access points to the river. They learn the geography of a temporary city, where to sleep, where to eat, where to meet relatives, where to pray. In these hours, devotion looks like logistics. A pilgrim who cannot find water cannot stay calm. So the first ritual is survival. Third, waiting. Waiting is everywhere. Waiting for an auspicious hour, waiting for a corridor to open, waiting for elders to pass, waiting for the akaras. Waiting becomes a discipline, and discipline becomes devotion. The festival trains patience as a communal skill. Fourth, approach. The approach to the river is often the most intense moment because everyone feels the pull of the same center. Yet you can watch how people manage that intensity. They hold hands, they form lines, they keep children close, they make room for satis and processions. They follow signals, drums, announcements, the movement of volunteers. Fifth, the dip. The dip is the climax, but it is not identical for everyone. Some enter and submerge fully, quickly, as if ripping off a bandage. Some enter slowly, dipping hands first, touching forehead, whispering prayers. Some enter with tears, some enter with laughter, some enter with a face that looks determined, like they are negotiating with the unseen. The dip is physical, but what it represents is psychological, the act of letting go. Sixth, the aftermath. People step out, shivering, dripping, smiling. They change clothes, they air, they drink water, they sit and breathe. This is often where emotion hits. The ritual is done, and the body releases tension. Some people cry quietly. Some look calm. Some look stunned, like they cannot believe they are still standing after a journey they once feared. Seventh, offering and gratitude. Many pilgrims perform additional rituals, offering flowers, lighting small lamps, giving donations, visiting nearby temples, listening to discourses. The dip is central, but it is not the only spiritual act. It is the doorway. The rest is the walkthrough. Eighth, return. At some point, every pilgrim leaves. They pack. They search for relatives. They navigate the temporary city one last time, and then they return to ordinary life, carrying a story that is difficult to explain to someone who was not there. This is the narrative arc the camera must capture. Not only crowd size, but human transformation. Kumbh Mela is a festival where the most important thing is not what you see, but what happens inside people when they believe they are allowed to begin again. That is why the river is not just water. It is a script for renewal. If Kumbh Mela has a secret, it isn't hidden in a locked room. It's written into behavior. Rule 1 is rhythm. You don't rush the river. You approach it. You let the crowd breathe, and you move as if the person beside you matters as much as your own arrival, because at this scale, impatience is not a personality. It's a hazard. Rule 2 is corridor. Paths are not suggestions here. They are lifelines. A clear lane is the difference between a festival and an emergency. So people learn a quiet discipline. Keep the channel open. Keep your group close. Let others pass when they must. Order becomes a kind of mutual protection. Rule 3 is care. In the world outside, crowds are often built from anger or appetite, people gathering to demand, to buy, to take. At Kumbh, the fuel is different. It is aspiration toward cleansing, toward promise, toward meaning, and aspiration changes posture. It changes hands. It makes strangers offer water, make space, lift a child, guide an elder. That is how the shoreline stays human. Not because everyone is perfect, but because the ritual itself trains the crowd to remember what a crowd can be. And once you see these rules, The river stops looking like a destination. It starts looking like a teacher. To understand the role of the sadhis at Kumbh, you have to understand what it means to step outside ordinary life. Most people live by a clock, work, deadlines, messages, obligations, payments, plans. Time is currency, and it is always running out. A sadhu lives differently. Renunciation is not just a lifestyle choice. It is a radical reordering of priorities. The sadhu gives up home, career, sometimes even family ties, not necessarily out of rejection, but out of a different hunger, the desire to seek liberation, truth, or spiritual depth beyond ordinary attachments. At Kumbh, the sadhu becomes a visible symbol of that hunger. For pilgrims, seeing sadhis is part of the experience because the sadhu represents what many people secretly long for but cannot pursue fully: freedom from the weight of constant wanting. Even if a pilgrim returns home to responsibilities, the presence of the sadhu plants a question in the heart. What if my life could be lighter? The sadhis are also organizers, whether they call themselves that or not. Their akaras maintain traditions, sequences, and codes of behavior. They hold authority in ritual space, and authority matters when millions gather. Not authority based on police power, but authority based on spiritual legitimacy that people voluntarily respect. This is one of Kumbh's hidden technologies: voluntary discipline. A pilgrim will wait in line longer when they believe waiting is part of devotion. A crowd will make space for an elder because the culture treats care as sacred. A corridor will remain passable because people understand the ritual depends on order. In a world where crowds often become conflict, this voluntary discipline is astonishing. From far away, the riverbank looks like chaos. Up close, you begin to see the hidden architecture. There are pathways, lanes, entrances, exits. There are volunteers guiding movement, repeating the same directions all day with calm voices because calm is contagious. There are temporary bridges, barricades, signage, water points, medical stations, sanitation corridors. There are people whose job is not to bathe, not to pray, not to take pictures. Their job is to keep the festival alive, because Kumbh at this scale is not only a spiritual phenomenon, it is a survival problem, and tradition preserved not only stories, but systems, paths, sequences, roles, and rules that help a gathering of staggering size remain, most of the time, remarkably peaceful. This is one of the quiet truths of Kumbh Mela. Beneath the mysticism, there is organization, and one of the strongest organizing forces is visible the moment you see the sadhis moving as groups. These monastic orders, often called akaras, did not simply attend the Kumbh. They became part of its spine. Their processions, their hierarchy, their discipline shaped the rhythm of the most important bathing days. The akaras are not simply groups of they are institutions, lineages with identity, discipline, symbols, and history. To outsiders, an akara procession can look like spectacle. Flags waving, drums pounding, botis painted with ash, chants rolling forward like thunder. But inside the festival's logic, the procession is a map. It tells millions where the center is. It establishes sequence. It reduces uncertainty. Uncertainty is what makes crowds dangerous. When people do not know what will happen next, they push. When they believe they will miss the moment, they panic. When they feel unseen, they surge. Sequence is the antidote. Shahi Snandayas are therefore more than spiritual highlights. They are crowd management through ritual. The akaras enter first in an order that participants recognize. That order communicates. The moment is not slipping away. It is coming in sequence for everyone. This is why Kumbh can feel calm in moments when it should be chaotic. The ritual is not only meaning, it is system. In many Kumbh celebrations, the most anticipated ritual is the Shahi Snandayar royal bath, when akaras enter first in formal sequence. It is spectacle, yes, but it is also structure, a ritualized order designed to guide the energy of millions toward a single riverbank without dissolving into panic. But here, the twist outsiders rarely understand. The sacred and the practical are not enemies here. They are partners. Devotion creates the reason. Structure makes it survivable, and the closer you look, the more the rituals multiply. A hand scatters flower petals on the water. A small lamp is lit and released into the current. A forehead touches the ground in a gesture so quick, you almost miss it. A whisper of prayer private, almost inaudible, vanishes into the roar of the crowd. Each action carries layers. Gratitude, surrender, purification, continuity. And this is where the festival becomes both deeply personal and unmistakably collective. Every dip in the river, every whispered prayer, every small offering is a thread end together. Those threads become something enormous, a single shared act repeated by millions, held together by myth, timing, music, and order. But to understand why people keep returning generation after generation, we need to step into the human heart of it. Who comes, and why? The most revealing question is not, why do people come once? It is, why do people return? Many pilgrims who come once return again, even though the journey is exhausting, the heat is punishing, and the crowd is overwhelming. They return because the festival gives something modern life often cannot: a legitimate reset. In ordinary life, starting over is difficult. People remember your mistakes. Your routines trap you. Your obligations keep you moving even when you are broken inside. At Kumbh, the reset has a public container. You can say, I went to the river, and everyone understands what that means. It does not solve your problems, but it changes your posture toward them. It makes your intention visible. Kumbh also gives people a sense of belonging that is not based on achievement. You do not need to be rich to participate. You do not need to be famous. You do not need to be impressive. You only need to show up and move with the crowd toward the same water. That equality can be emotionally shocking. For many, it is the first time in years they have felt part of a collective purpose without competition. And then there are those who return because Kumbh is not only a bath, it is learning. The camps, the teachers, the debates, the storytelling, these are all part of the tradition. People come to hear discourses, to meet guru, to ask questions they cannot ask at home, to search for a frame that makes suffering bearable. Kumbh becomes a marketplace of meaning, and in the modern era, that marketplace is even more important, because many people feel spiritually hungry but socially isolated. Kumbh offers spiritual density. You are surrounded by seekers. That alone can be healing. So people return because Kumbh allows them to feel seen by a community, by tradition, by the cosmos, by the river. For moments you can't forget. 1. The mother and the child. A mother lifts her child above the crowd so the child can see the river. The child is excited. Then suddenly, quiet. The mother's face softens, because she realizes the child is not just seeing water. The child is witnessing a human ocean aimed at a single meaning. Years later, that memory will become identity. To the elder's pace. An elder moves slowly near the shoreline. People make space, not because they were ordered, but because they recognize the dignity of slow movement. In Tadmoman, the festival teaches ethics without a speech. Kare y Sakre. 3. The whispered prayer. A man stands apart from his group for a moment, eyes closed, lips barely moving. You cannot hear his words. That is the point. The festival gives him privacy inside a crowd. For the dip and the smile. A young woman dips fully into the river and rises, wiping water from her face. She smiles not for a camera, not for anyone else. Does a small smile that looks like relief. Whatever she carried, she set down something, at least for a breath. Kumbh Mela looks like one crowd. It is not. It is not. It is thousands of smaller worlds, stitched together, families, seekers, volunteers, storytellers, teachers, each with a different reason for being here, all orbiting the same sacred act. Follow a family. A father tightens the strap on a small bag. A grandmother moves slowly, guided by a hand that knows her pace. A child stares at the river as if it's alive. They didn't come for an image. They came for meaning. Maybe they are fulfilling a vow made during illness. Maybe they are asking for strength. Maybe they are simply obeying a tradition older than the family name. Now follow a seeker. They walk alone, eyes scanning signs, trying to find a teacher's camp. For them, the river is important, but it is not the only doorway. The real doorway is learning. Kumbh has always been a crossroads, where ideas travel, teachers and seekers meeting, debates unfolding, hymns spreading, new movements forming, and then follow Aranosan. A sadhu sits near a fire, still as stone. Ash covers the skin like a second identity. The body is present, but the posture says, I belong to another rhythm. People approach respectfully, offering food, seeking blessing, asking questions. The sadhu speaks quietly or not at all. The power is not in volume. The power is in presence. Kumbh allows these worlds to collide without collapsing. It does something rare. It lets private pain and private hope exist in public without being exposed, without being explained. You can come with a vow, with grief, with a prayer you can't speak. The river doesn't ask you to prove it, it only asks you to enter. And then you notice something else. The festival doesn't erase differences. Eat old stim, different lineages, different customs, different philosophies, even tension. At times yet the river remains the center everyone recognizes. In Tatsinse, Kumbh becomes a rare kind of unity. Not sameness, but shared purpose. And when night comes, the entire landscape changes. Fires glow, lamps flicker. The river reflects thousands of moving lights. Voices soften. The crowd doesn't disappear, it exhales. In the darkness, the pilgrimage feels less like an event and more like a living prayer spread across miles of sand and water. But the moment you begin to think this is only spiritual, the festival shows you its other face. Because the most astonishing thing about Kumbh Mela may not be what it means, but how it functions. After the festival dissolves, the landscape looks empty. But for pilgrims, the festival leaves behind a new internal geography. They carry the memory of a sunrise over water. They carry the sound of chanting in their bones. They carry the feeling of stepping into a river, as if stepping into a promise. And that memory becomes a resource. Months later, when life becomes heavy again, a pilgrim can close their eyes and remember the river. And that memory can function like a small anchor. I have begun again before, I can begin again now. This is why the festival persists, even in modernity. People still need rituals that give them permission to reset. They still need places where grief can be carried publicly without explanation. They still need communal experiences that are not built around consumption. Kumbh offers that, and perhaps that is the final lesson. Renewal is not a one-time achievement. Renewal is a practice. It must be revisited, it must be rehearsed. A river keeps flowing. A crowd keeps arriving. A story keeps being told. And in that repetition, human life finds a way to stay possible. A city built for profit is common. A city built for power is common. A city built for survival is common. A city built for purification is rare. At Kumbh, the temporary city must do everything a permanent city does without the luxury of permanence. It must provide water, sanitation, medical aid, information, transportation, routes, safe corridors, and the ability to respond when something goes wrong. This requires labor on a scale that matches devotion. There are workers laying temporary roads and bridges, teams installing lights, volunteers distributing water, medical staff treating dehydration, sanitation crews keeping pathways usable, security and crowd control planners monitoring choke points, religious authorities coordinating processions, local administrators balancing tradition with safety. These people do not appear in the myth, but they keep the myth survivable. And that reveals a deeper truth. Spirituality at scale requires infrastructure. The sacred depends on the practical. A festival that ignores the body becomes dangerous. A festival that cares for the body protects the soul's chance to breathe. Kumbh is therefore not only a pilgrimage, it is a demonstration of collective capability. What humans can build when a shared purpose is strong enough. From above, it looks like a metropolis that shouldn't exist. Roads appear where there were none. Tents become neighborhoods. Signs point in every direction. There are zones, corridors, entry points, medical stations, and long lines that move like rivers of their own. And all of it has one job: to keep people safe at a scale that punishes mistakes. This is where the modern Kumbh becomes something else entirely. Not just the world's spiritual magnet, but a real-time stress test of human organization, because the danger isn't only the river. It's heat, exhaustion, confusion, bottlenecks. It's what happens when the body gets tired before the soul feels finished. Most people think the miracle is that millions show up. But the real miracle is that millions can move. Modern Kumbh relies on planning that blends tradition with infrastructure. Temporary bridges, controlled pathways, sanitation systems, drinking water points, crowd routing strategies, emergency response teams. The sacred moment still matters. But survival depends on what you don't see in the footage. Schedules, coordination, and thousands of workers doing unglamorous tasks so the river can remain a place of renewal, not tragedy. Picture a volunteer at a junction where crowds split. They repeat the same instructions all day with a calm voice, because calm is contagious. Their work is quiet, but it holds the experience together. In a gathering this large, compassion looks like logistics. Technology may assist communication systems, density monitoring, rapid alerts, but technology is not the main character. The main character is responsibility, the willingness of a civilization to build a temporary world for meaning, and to keep it humane. And then, after the most sacred days pass, something even more surprising happens. The city begins to vanish. Tents come down. Corridors empty. Signs disappear. The shoreline returns to silence, as if nothing happened except the people who leave, carrying the experience like a mark you can't photograph. Which brings us to the final question. When the lights go out and the crowd is gone, what remains? It dissolves. The corridors that carried millions empty. Fires die to embers. The temporary city returns itself to the riverbank piece by piece, as if it was never meant to stay. And maybe that's the point, because Kumbh has always been a lesson in impermanence. The idea that everything you build, identity, fear, sorrow, even certainty, can be placed gently on the ground and left behind. In the last light of evening, the river looks ordinary again, but the people don't. Some leave quietly, still holding prayer in their posture. Some laugh with relief, as if they survived something they can't explain. Some carry bottles of water like treasure, not because it's rare, but because it now means something. A reminder that for a brief window, they aligned themselves with a rhythm larger than their own life. And even for those who do not share the belief, something remains undeniable. Millions came seeking the same kind of thing. Not fame, not entertainment, not conquest. Meaning, renewal. A clean beginning. For a moment, strangers moved as one body, without being commanded by force, guided instead by story, by sky, and by the quiet discipline of tradition. In a world that often feels fractured, the festival offers a rare image. Unity without sameness, order without silence, awe without possession. Then the river keeps flowing. It carries away lamps, chants fade, footprints vanish. The shore becomes just shore again. But the question lingers, the real reason this gathering continues to matter. What would change in a human life if we truly believed renewal was possible? If we believed the weight we carry could be set down, even if only for a day? Maybe that's why Kumbh survives every century. It doesn't promise a perfect world. It offers a moment to begin again. If this journey moved you, write one word in the comments: renewal, or share the tradition from your culture that helps people start over. And if you want more cinematic journeys into the world's greatest human rituals, subscribe, because we'll meet again at the next shoreline.